10 superstars that instantly made a team worse. We've looked at 10 players that instantly made their team better in the past, but now we're pretty much doing the complete opposite of that. So these were all trades where a team trades for a star or near star player that they think is going to be a real difference maker on their team, but it actually ends up backfiring and makes them much worse, to the point where that star finds himself pretty much off the team not too much long after. Some players just don't fit into certain systems, and here was 10 of them. But first, I want to give a shout out to DraftKings Sportsbook for sponsoring today's video. The NBA season's back, so let's get it started right with the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're a new customer, you can make any $5 NBA bet, and if you win, you get $200 in free bets. Sportsbook's a great way to make the NBA season a lot more fun. Putting certain bets, spreads, or odds on your favorite team can really turn a regular season game into a new experience. Personally, my strategy is to bet on over and unders of players I'm familiar with, plus I think the start of the season is the best time to bet on DraftKings Sportsbook, because a lot of players are on new teams, and that leaves some of the odds unsure about how they'll perform. So if you have a bold prediction and you're right, you can pick up a lot of early wins. Plus, with same game parlays, you can combine multiple bets from the same game to give yourself a shot at even bigger winnings all season long. And if you don't live in a state where sports betting is available yet, well, don't forget about DraftKings Daily Fantasy, which I play every year because they've been innovating more and more ways to win some cash this basketball season. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now with my link in the description. Use promo code Austin, make any $5 bet this week, and get $200 in free bets if your team wins. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with promo code Austin. Shout out to them for the sponsor. Now let's get back to the video. Starting first with the DeMar DeRozan trade, and most of us will remember this one, but it's interesting. By 2017, Kawhi Leonard had become a superstar and led his team to a 61-21 record into the Western Conference Finals before going down to an injury, which Kawhi thought the team didn't handle correctly, so he refused to play for the entire 2017 season and forced a trade. And with this being the scenario, obviously the Spurs weren't going to get a fair deal, which is why they got DeRozan in return. So of course this trade instantly made them worse, but even given the circumstances, they became way worse than they could have imagined. The entire 2017 season that Kawhi sat out, the Spurs finished with a 47-35 record. They trade for DeRozan, and with pretty much the exact same team the next year, they end up with a 48-34 record. So they only added a single extra win playing without a superstar to playing with DeMar. And it just stayed downhill because for his entire time there, it left the Spurs in the middle of the road amongst NBA teams, and they finished with a losing record in 2 out of his 3 years there. DeMar was playing his worst basketball in years, and the team didn't know which direction they were headed. So like, we knew DeMar was probably going to make the Spurs a worse team, but I don't think anyone knew they'd get that bad, or else they probably wouldn't have taken him from the Raptors. But speaking of the Raptors, an under the radar trade went down involving them back in 2013. You see, Rudy Gay was playing for the Memphis Grizzlies at the time, and he was doing so as a 20-point per game scorer who did make his team better. But the Toronto Raptors wanted to bring in another star to play alongside their young core of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan with hopes that they could all finally make the playoffs together. So they traded for Rudy to bring him in, and at least personally, he didn't miss a step. He put up numbers that were right in line with what he had been doing his entire career. But those weren't the numbers that were the problem, because after he joined the team, the Raptors got worse in nearly every single team category. Offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating, assist ratio, true shooting percentage, and pace numbers all went down. It became clear that management missed the mark on this one, and it was all due to the fact that Rudy wasn't a great defender, held onto the ball way too much for a young team that previously excelled at ball movement, and would shoot by far the most shots on the team. Listen, on some teams he would have been a great fit, but definitely not the Raptors, which is why he was traded only 18 games into his first full season with them. So yeah, that's how you definitely know you're making your team worse. I think another great example that's pretty similar is when Kyrie Irving was traded to the Boston Celtics. Kyrie requested a trade from the Cavaliers, and so the Celtics were getting a major steal by trading their superstar in Isaiah Thomas for him. Boston had just made the Eastern Conference Finals the year before, so they were hoping for a championship now. And even though the Celtics did end up finishing with a better record, it started to become clear that Kyrie Irving was actually making them worse. He was a ball stopper on offense, and with him holding onto the ball too much, it didn't mesh well with the young up-and-coming Celtics team. Plus, his lack of leadership as the veteran wasn't helping anyone either. And all these problems really became clear when his team made it to the Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals without him. Then got worse the following year, and only made the second round when Kyrie Irving pretty much gave up on them halfway through the postseason. So with this deal, the Boston Celtics instantly got set back as a team and pretty much got the opposite outcome of what they were expecting. And the Celtics are going to come up a few times throughout the video, like for the trade they made in 2010, they sent Kendrick Perkins to the OKC Thunder for Jeff Green. And unlike some of the others in this video, they didn't actually get worse from the star they brought in, but from the player that they lost. I mean, Jeff Green was a great addition for the Celtics. He was a 25-year-old with star potential and made for a great third or fourth option on the current team. But bringing him in actually really hurt them because it meant they gave up Kendrick Perkins. This Celtics starting five had just won a title together and then made the finals the next year, only for their starting center to get traded soon after. And this was the move that all of those guys have come out and said was what ruined their team's chemistry and a chance at another title. Kendrick even said that KG cried once he got the news of what had happened. Sometimes a player means a lot more to a locker room than the stat sheet will ever show. And sure, Boston would still go on to have a lot of success after this trade, but it did without a doubt negatively impact them in ways we couldn't actually see. Now listen, I'll make this next one quick, but I have to mention it because how could I not? But clearly the Russell Westbrook Lakers trade made them a worse team no matter how you spin it. In 2020, LA won the title. In 2021, they dealt with a lot of injuries to their stars, but still made the 7th seed. And to be fair, this past season, LeBron and AD continued to miss a lot of games, but Russ played almost all of his, and the Lakers still won 9 less games than the year prior and completely missed the postseason. If you're bringing in a player that was supposed to be a superstar and you win 9 less games with him, someone is definitely doing something wrong. Of course, it was Russell Westbrook actually getting exposed for the player he is, but also them missing out on the 4 players they traded to get him in Montrezl Harrell, Kyle Kuzma, KCP, and Isaiah Jackson that really contributed to their downgrade, which was obviously another terrible move. But while we're on the topic of LA, we have to go back to about 10 years ago to the first time Dwight Howard was traded there. And that was a move that did instantly make that team much worse than before he got there. You see, because at this time, LA was just 2 years removed from a championship. They had a couple of bad years in between, but trading Andrew Bynum for Dwight Howard, the best center of his time by miles, was supposed to elevate Los Angeles back to championship level. In the offseason, it instantly made them favorites to win it all. But it soon became very clear that instead, Dwight was instantly doing the opposite and making this team worse. Due to his lack of motivation, work ethic, ability to take the game seriously, and him just straight up underperforming. It all led to him butting heads with Kobe Bryant, and as a matter of fact, they finished with a similar record to the year before, but that was only because Kobe Bryant had to end the season and go on that insane stretch that ended in him tearing his Achilles. And he made them worse that season, but even so much worse years after that, to the point where they didn't recover fully from this until after LeBron James joined the team. But Dwight didn't do all that alone, because Steve Nash has to take a lot of blame too. Because while Steve was 38 years old at the time of him getting traded to the Lakers, he had still just made the All-Star team, so they thought they were getting somewhat of that in this deal. But instead, Steve's game collapsed, and so did his body. And that was unfortunate given the fact that LA traded 2 first and 2 second-round picks to get him, only for him to barely ever be available to play and average near career lows across the board. LA thought they had a super team, and not only did one of their stars underperform, but both did. Now, one that's probably not as remembered took place back in 2011. That was the year Dirk Nowitzki and the Mavs won the championship. They had a roster full of guys who all worked perfectly together in a system, and they dominated that year because of it. This team was really something special, but after the championship was when a few guys' contracts were up, most notably Tyson Chandler, who was being heavily looked at by Golden State and Houston. But Mark Cuban didn't want to pay him too much money so that he'd have enough to make offers for Dwight Howard and Darren Williams once they hit free agency, which were 2 players they never got. So Tyson Chandler left the team, and they let JJ Barea, Deshaun Stevenson, and Caron Butler all walk to save money, and instead signed Lamar Odom, Vince Carter, and Delonte West, which was a major bust. Tyson Chandler says that had the Mavs kept their team together, they could have ran it back and won 2 straight, and that's hard to argue against. But because they didn't, the very next year this former championship squad was swept in the first round by the OKC Thunder. So trading Tyson instantly made them a much worse team. But the Mavs' bad decision making didn't stop there. It only continued in 2014, because Rajon Rondo's time on the Celtics was coming to a close. So Dallas made the move to trade for him, and they gave up Jay Crowder, Jameer Nelson, Brandon Wright, and a first-round pick for him, which was a lot of pieces. And it was almost right away that Rondo negatively impacted this team. He was traded there in January, and by February, the Mavs had dropped from having the best offense in the league down to 4th. And that's a huge step down with the addition of just a single player. He was supposed to be one of the new leaders of the team, but he was anything but that. Instead, he had no chemistry with his teammates, butted heads with Rick Carlisle, and was just flat out benched in game 2 of the first round because they were just better without him on the floor. At the time, the team told reporters it was because he injured his back, but it later came out that both sides just agreed that they'd be better off without him playing. I don't know how it's possible for a player to fit in that bad on a team, but it happened. I guess Dallas can just take some blame, but either way, this whole situation definitely hurt them. Another point guard disaster occurred between the Detroit Pistons and the Denver Nuggets. By this point in 2008, Allen Iverson was still playing like a star in Denver, while Chauncey Billups hadn't lost a step in Detroit a few years removed from their NBA championship. But it came as a shock when the Pistons decided to swap the 2 players in what became a disaster for them, because management said it was time to switch things up and that the team had had the same core for an eternity. It's not even like the Pistons were a bad team now. They had just come off a 59-win season and took the eventual champions to 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. There was really no point of this trade, but it went through, and over on Denver's side with Chauncey there, they didn't miss a step. But as for Detroit, well, Iverson came out and had the worst year of his career, threw off the entire chemistry of the team, and didn't make it through the season because the Pistons told him Rodney Stuckey was going to start and he was going to have to come off the bench. So Iverson said he just wasn't going to play, and he didn't, then just left the team team the next year, causing the Pistons to now finish with a 39-43 record and get swept in the first round. And out of all the errors these teams have made in these trades, this has definitely got to be one of the worst. But of course, we know that the Paul Pierce, Jason Terry, and Kevin Garnett trade to the Nets is still probably the worst trade of all time, and I don't think even anything needs to be said here. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next video.